Hi, this is Chuck Gardner. This is another one of my boring golf tutorials. In this one, I want to focus on wrist action. Now, wrist action is something that I did incorrectly as a beginning golfer for years. I had a tendency to pronate my lead hand, which means turn it palm down as I took the club away. I would take the club and my first move would be to rotate it this way, which brings it too low and too far inside. Now, what changed that was going to a TJ Maxx on a Sunday afternoon after church. I would always go there after church because it was right across the street from where I went to church, and my golf course was there also. And I was going through the old book section and I came across this book of golf quotes from old-time golfers. And in this book, there was a quote by Jimmy Demaret, who was a 3-time Masters champion in the 30s. And the quote was that the golf swing isn't difficult to master once the golfer learns how to keep the club head outside of the hands and stay in balance. Well, that made me realize that outside the hands thing, that I wasn't doing that. What happens when you pronate, the club comes inside the hands. And that's what I want to demonstrate and try to illustrate here why you need what is called a strong lead hand in your golf grip, because that is what will keep your club head outside the hands and also allow you at the same time to freely waggle the club up and down in the wrist, which is where you get most of your acceleration. So I'm going to widen the camera here and then try to illustrate this. Something I want to clarify about how I grip the club. I suggest that when gripping the club, you overlap the bases of the thumbs. And that is based on the fact, my observation, that when you do that and waggle your wrists into extension and flexion back and forth, what that does is cause the wrist to rotate around the base of the thumbs. Now, this action here gives you symmetry to the swing. Now, I suggest when gripping the club that you put the base of the lead thumb on the center of the shaft. But what I have been neglecting to mention is that when I do that with a neutral grip, the top of the shaft isn't dead center with the leading edge of the club. I rotate the club by about 45 degrees and then put my hand on top with my wrist straight, wrapping my fingers around the back. So my finger is aligned with the center of the shaft, but the club face is 45 degrees. And the reason for that is that turning it back to square, what that does is it forces your forearm to turn 45 degrees. Well, that twisting action of the forearm pulls all of the slack out of this muscle here that controls the bending of the elbow, which is called the brachioradialis muscle. Now, Hogan suggested gripping the club up in the air and then lowering it. if you grip it up in the air and lower it, it has the same effect on the brachioradialis muscles of both arms. And what it does is give you a very firm arm triangle. Now, what I have observed about having a weak versus what they call a strong lead hand. Now, if you start with your wrist straight or bowed, you'll find it's very difficult to freely waggle the club. But if you instead do as I do, start at 45 degrees closed and then rotate it so it's square, this brachioradialis firms up the lead arm, and it becomes much easier from this position here where the hand is pronated and extended to waggle the club freely. If you rest it on the middle two fingers in the grip, it becomes very easy to let the club whip down around the hands, much more so than with a straight or a bowed wrist, which is why I think the modern technique of bowing the wrist, which Hogan did as well, but he started and changed it on the way down. He was actually rotating down into the ball. I think that I find it in my swing, much better to just start with the club 45 degrees closed. Then what I do is I turn it square, keeping the lead wrist strong. Then I put my middle two fingers underneath and the trail hand on top, trying to get the bases of the thumbs together. Now that allows me to waggle the club, and you notice where it's waggling. It's waggling well outside the hands versus keeping it straight and bringing it back here. Now the club head is inside the hands, and that's why that hint from Demaret was such a mind blower for me, because I realized I had been doing it wrong. So again, by starting with it 45 degrees closed and rotating, getting this all firmed up, and then using the two middle hands as the hook fulcrum that it rests on, all you really need to do in the swing is turn your shoulders. The club still is outside the hands. You bring it up, it's still outside the hands. My wrist orientation hasn't changed, and it comes back down square to the ball and then rotates through into the target. Now there, what I did is the mistake of trying to push the club head out into the finish. What you need to do is come down and just let the club head rotate and keep the hands a constant radius as the trail arm extends. So it changes the path of the club head. The club head actually comes in at a 45-degree angle, and then as the wrists allow it to straighten, the trail arm straightens and the wrists lower it. That's what squares it to the target line. It comes down here at a 45-degree angle and then makes a turn to straight and then comes back and closes into the finish and then comes up again. But the key thing for me to correct my mistake of pronating it and bringing it too far inside, which causes the over-the-top action, it was the whole idea of keeping it outside the hands, which led to my realization that if you have a strong grip, you will waggle the club, and you can do that and execute the swing ideally in balance, which gets to Demaret's second point in his riddle. if you keep the club outside the hands and then just turn your body, your spine, your shoulders, your arm triangle, you will stay in balance. The key to staying in balance in the finish, which I was talking about in my last couple of videos, is the whole idea of connecting this trail elbow with the body as you extend your trail arm. This, you get a lot of this action here, like throwing a ball down on the ground. This is a good drill. Just take a ball and throw it down at the ground sidearm. It's like throwing a spear. And this action here creates a lot of acceleration with the hands. Well, this hand is connected to this hand, which is connected to the golf club. So if you come down to here and do nothing but straighten your arm, you're getting a lot of acceleration of your hands, and then you add the acceleration of it whipping around the hands, which is facilitated by keeping a strong grip. Now, if you have a weak grip, like Hogan did at Impact, that worked for Hogan because he went like this during the swing. He was taking the face from open to shut before impact. That requires coordination and timing. That is why when Hogan missed, it was with a duck hook. Because if you get the timing wrong of rotating that wrist into the ball, and the ball stays on the face too long, it's going to come off with hook spin. This way, if you keep the wrist strong, just bring it back, rotate the shoulders down, and then just release it, there's fewer moving parts, and the odds of success are greater. So, that is the detail that I wanted to cover. Mainly the fact that when I'm putting my wrist, the base of my lead thumb, I'm starting with the club face 45 degree closed and then rotating it. So the base of the thumb actually winds up around 2 o'clock on the club, and then this one here winds up on top of it in the groove right about 12 o'clock. So this thumb starts at 12 and goes to 2. This one here winds up right on top at 2 o'clock, and that facilitates the hinge action. So that's it. I hope you find it helpful. Thanks for watching. Subscribe or hit the like button if you find it useful.